You may agree with me that nothing breaks your heart more in baseball than seeing your team endure a losing streak. The agony of defeat piling up game after game can wear down even the most dedicated fan. Even the Chicago White Sox have made history this season, but not in the way that anyone would have hoped. Even more shocking is the painful route that teams like the Orioles in 2021, the Royals in 2005, and others have taken. You'll see how quickly momentum can change in baseball and how some teams went from having one bad game to having another, and an unending streak of losses. How did these streaks happen? Can one bad stretch really sum up a season? What happens when a team's season starts to slip away? Let's get into it. At number 1, with a 23-game losing streak, is the 1961 Philadelphia Phillies. People will always remember the Philadelphia Phillies for having the longest losing streak in Major League Baseball history at 23 games. The Phillies went into 1961 hoping to at least play competitive baseball after a poor 1960 season, but no one could have known what was going to happen. The losing streak began on July 29, 1961, when the team lost to the San Francisco Giants 4-3. Even though it wasn't a blowout, it was a tough loss. It was also the start of a terrible stretch in which the Phillies would lose every game in every way you can think of. Their pitching crew, which was led by Art Mahaffey and Chris Short, couldn't keep the other team from scoring every night. At other times, their lineup, which included players like Johnny Callison and Tony Taylor, would be totally silent, unable to score. All of the mistakes, lost leads, and missed chances added up. The Phillies lost their 23rd straight game on August 20, 1961 to the Milwaukee Braves 9-2. That was the end of the longest game in a row. It didn't really feel like a win when the streak ended on August 20th with a 7-4 win over the Braves in the second game of a doubleheader. Instead, it felt more like a merciful end to the agony. The Phillies had a terrible 47-107 record at the end of the season, which put them at the bottom of the National League. In second place, the 1988 Orioles with 21 straight losses. Opening day at Memorial Stadium on April 4, 1988 was the start of it all. Orioles fans crowded the stands, eager to watch their team play the Brewers. But what happened was a terrible 12-0 loss. That loss wasn't just a loss. It was a sign of more bad things to come. Everything went wrong for the Orioles that day, and it turned out that they wouldn't have much luck for the next 3 weeks. As more and more money was lost, the pressure grew. The Orioles tried changing the lineup, the rotation, and even called up players from the minor leagues to try to break out of their slump, but nothing worked. It was as if the baseball gods had decided that 1988 wasn't going to be their year. Veterans on their pitching staff like Mike Boddicker couldn't keep opponents from scoring, and stars on their attack like Cal Ripken Jr. and Eddie Murray seemed to be stuck in neutral. It seemed like every time the Orioles went out to play, they lost. When they lost 20 games in a row, it was too much for them to handle. Then, finally, on April 29, 1988, the Orioles found relief. Facing the Chicago White Sox on the road, the O's managed to put together a complete game, shutting out the Sox 9-0 to end the streak at 21 games. The Orioles finished the season with a 54-107 record, dead last in the AL East. Also tied at number 2 with 21 straight losses is the 2024 White Sox. After setting a franchise record with a 14-game skid earlier in the year, it seemed impossible that things could get any worse. Baseball, on the other hand, can surprise you. This is even very new. It started against the Minnesota Twins on July 10, 2024, in the second game of a doubleheader. It began as just another loss, but quickly turned into something much worse. The Sox couldn't get out of their slump no matter what game they played. They couldn't get the ball to hit or throw, and their defense looked like it was on vacation. The All-Star break in the middle of the streak didn't help. It gave the team too much time to think about how bad things were. As the losses piled up, it became hard to ignore the similarities to the Orioles in 1988. That's right, the White Sox also couldn't get anything right. They seemed to let every close game slip through their hands. By the time the streak reached 21 games, it was a burden no one wanted to carry. For the Sox, a win, any win, would do just to stop the losing streak. With a hard-fought win over the Oakland A's on August 6, 2024, they finally got it. But while the win was a welcome sight, the damage had been done. It was the same story for the White Sox as it was for the Orioles. They were stuck with an unwanted past. Now in fourth place are the 1969 Expos with 20 straight losses. The 1969 Montreal Expos were many firsts. They were the first Canadian team in Major League Baseball, the first team to bring baseball to a new country, and sadly, the first team to lose 20 games in a row in their first season. The streak started on May 13, 1969, when the Houston Astros beat the Expos 10-3. Before anyone could blink, the Expos were stuck in a downward slide that looked like it would be impossible to get out of. The way the losses happened was just as painful as the losses themselves. The Expos lost almost all of their games, whether it was their pitchers who got hammered or their players who couldn't connect. The Expos tried to fix things by switching up their lineup and their tactics. But nothing worked. The players, coaches, and the whole city got tired of the streak. The streak finally ended on June 8, 1969, when the Expos beat the Los Angeles Dodgers 4-3. However, the Expos would go on to finish the season with a 52-110 record. Another team tied for fourth place is the 1943 Philadelphia Athletics with 20 straight losses. After a good 4-0 win over the Yankees on August 6th, the A's were 40-58 and doing well enough to stay in the game. But what happened next was an epic failure. The A's lost to the Yankees 3-1 the next day, August 8th, and they couldn't get a break after that. Game after game, the streak went on, and it looked like the A's couldn't stop it. Eventually, on August 24th, the A's won 8-1 in the second game of a doubleheader against the Chicago White Sox, ending the 20-game losing streak. But even that win couldn't take away all the anger and sadness from the previous weeks. The A's lost their next 4 games, and they finished the season with a 49-105 record, which was a bad mark because of those terrible losses. Also tied for fourth place are the 1906 Boston Americans with 20 straight losses. The 1906 Boston Americans, who would later be called the Red Sox, had a terrible season. They lost 20 games in a row, which is still remembered throughout baseball history. On May 1st, their fierce foes, the New York Yankees, beat them 8-0, which was a bad start to the streak. The team was having a lot of problems. Even the great Cy Young, who was in charge of the rotation of pitchers, couldn't stop the bleeding. Young himself had an unusual slump. The Americans' defense was weak, so opponents could take advantage of every mistake. Their offense, which should have saved them, failed and stopped working. During the streak, key players like Jimmy Collins and Chick Stahl had a hard time producing, and the team's hitting average dropped a lot. After a tough win over the Chicago White Sox on May 25th, the streak was over, but the damage had already been done. The Americans had a terrible 7-27 record, and it looked like they would not make it through the season. They ended up with a 49-105 record, which was a long way from the later success the team would have. The 2021 Orioles are in 7th place with 19 straight losses. It started on August 2nd, which was funny because it was after a win at Yankee Stadium. The O's wouldn't get another win until August 25th after that one. The Orioles were outscored by an amazing 108 runs during this 19-game stretch. This was the worst run difference by any team over 19 games since at least 1901. Their pitching staff, which was already having a tough time, took a huge beating. The bench was used a lot, early and often, which put the arms through too much work and caused even more leads to be blown. On the offensive side, the bats went cold. Key players like Cedric Mullins and Ryan Mountcastle did their best, but the lineup was too thin, and pitchers from the other team quickly took advantage of the holes. The team's defense wasn't much better. They kept giving up extra outs, which made the pitchers' problems even worse. Ground ball outs should have been easy for the infield to get, but they weren't always happening. The outfield also had trouble filling in the gaps, which let runners reach extra bases and score more runs. Additionally, the 2005 Kansas City Royals are tied for 7th place with 19 straight losses. It looked like the Kansas City Royals were turning a corner when they started losing games. In 13 innings, they beat the Chicago White Sox on July 27th. However, the baseball gods had other ideas. That very next day, the Royals lost in Tampa Bay, which started a losing streak that would last 19 games before it was finally broken. A lot of mistakes and bad positioning on defense cost the Royals runs, which made their problems even worse. Eventually, on August 20th, a win over the Oakland A's stopped the streak, but it was too late. With a terrible record of 56-106, the Royals' dreams of having a respectable season were dashed by that terrible streak. During these kinds of losing streaks, both teams and fans are put to the test. How have these losing runs and other tough times in baseball changed the way you feel about the sport? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and put on notifications for more videos. See you in the next video.